So my name is Bharati Chaturvedi. I'm the founder and the director of a non-profit in India called Chintan, which means another way of thinking. What Chintan really does, it tries to find solutions that are centered around environmental justice. For us, environmental justice means that it should be the people, especially the poor, should not be burdened by the consumption and the pollution of other people's consumption. It also means that the poor should also enjoy a high quality of life, not be forced to live in a really bad way. So Chintan works with informal sector recyclers, which are waste pickers, small traders, waste sorters, and we train them to help to handle waste professionally, so that cities whose waste that they handle can be cleaner and India can get cleaner for everybody. Because right now India has a lot of waste, there's a lot of illness from waste, there's huge pollution, and we don't know what to do about it. So Chintan finds a solution that is offered by the poor, by the informal sector, by formalizing and training them, and also working with the generators of the waste to accept these poor people. So in our session, what we were discussing today was how do you co-create smart cities? And what I was saying on behalf of Chintan was that co-creation means that everybody should be included. Most often, poor people, such as the waste pickers, are not able to be included because we haven't been able to organize them. We haven't been able to, in some way, help them to be sitting at that lead head table and converse and talk about their needs, as well as help them to understand their huge value to Indian cities. And so my point was that if we really want to co-create cities, we have to have a really equitable inclusion of the poor, particularly of the informal sector, who provide and run most Indian cities. In fact, 92% of all jobs in India are informal. My second point was that this takes a lot of investment, and we have to recognize it. You have to help people get organized, you have to help get new data, and you have to help bring everybody to the table, despite the fact that many people have a lot of problems, or the informal sector is really marginal or stigmatized by a majority of the population that is outside of it. So that my second point was really the need to invest in people if you really want to harness your human capital. My third point was that it shouldn't, that transformation takes place locally. A smart city is not going to be a smart city with a city plan. A smart city is going to be a smart city if it can actually harness its human capital using micro infrastructure, bridging the digital divide, bringing in technology, which then actually helps you to harness human capital locally. Only a number of local transformations can add up to a smart city. And finally, my fourth point was that we really need to exchange this kind of global understanding, bring lessons together, pool all of this, so that we can kind of leapfrog, because we're all urbanizing, and with climate change, we're seeing lots more people leaving agriculture, leaving the coasts and coming into cities. We have to find a city that is sustainable, that is inclusive, that is equitable, and so we have to share our lessons really fast. Let me tell you about a project that we do at the New Delhi railway station. Now, the rails in India came in around 1852, which is obviously a very long time ago. And it's actually the single most important way by which most of us travel across India. It's also the single biggest employment provider in our country. It's run by the government. And in the New Delhi railway station, which is one of the many railway stations in Delhi, you have nearly 500,000 people on that railway station every single day. We also have several trains that give you food, that cater. So you have a lot of waste that is generated, as you can imagine. And where does all this waste go? So in partnership with the railway authorities, who have actually been extremely innovative, we've been able to organize the waste pickers who were already there, bring in some trained waste pickers, get into these trains, collect the trash, bring it back, compost the biodegradable part, and the compost we give back every 2 months to the railway authorities to take all the plastic bottles and create chips out of them which sell at a really good rate, and then recycle all the other waste, including bread, which we actually feed and we give free to cows to eat, because otherwise they're running all over the roads and eating plastic bags and then they die. So we've tried to create a closed loop using local resources, and we've been very lucky because the railways have actually given us some space and given us various kinds of resources that we're able to use for it, provide livelihoods, close the loop, and actually create something that's replicable. And in fact, Chintan got the Deutsche Bank Urban Age Award last year for this work. So that is the kind of work that we would do, something that can stand on its feet, that's replicable, and that's really, really simple. So there are two kinds of citizens, if I really was going to explain it that way. One are the waste generators, the middle class of India, and the other are people who actually consume very little and handle that waste, which is the waste recyclers. So waste generators, we often work with volunteers. We address forums, we go to residents' welfare associations, which are associations of residents in a particular locality. We talk to schools, and a lot of our work really moves around working with volunteers and interns to help us reach out. And that's really effective as well, because they really understand their own neighborhoods and they understand their peers, and young people understand young people the best. We use also a lot of very visual media. We have exhibitions, we have really interesting PowerPoints. What we also do, I think, is that we help waste pickers to come and talk to these people. We say Chintan is a bridge. We want two types of citizens to be able to find common ground and empathy and work with each other. And so very often waste pickers will talk to school children, or school children will visit waste pickers, or residents will do a old clothes drive so that waste pickers have something for the winter. As far as waste pickers go, we organize them quite differently. We talk to them, we hold meetings on the landfills where they live or the slums where they live. We understand what their priorities are, we explain what we can do, and then we create mini projects out of it. So we say, oh, you want social security, you want the food, the social security related to subsidized food, so we'll help you do it. But then we'll also train them to understand their rights and their value to the city. So many local branches will come together and maybe go meet the chief minister with a demand, or maybe have a protest, or maybe have a celebration. And that's the way we work. We're an organization that creates bridges and gives knowledge and empowers people with information.
Very holistic approach.
So there's so many challenges, but I'll just stick with informal waste and informal sector. First of all, I think our cities are becoming, on one hand, technology is helping us know our cities better. On the other hand, we're becoming gated communities. So for a lot of the informal sector, it's very difficult to access waste anymore. And that's really the difference between Europe and a country like India. In Europe, you have all this waste and you want somebody to access it and use it. In India, we have all these people who want the waste, but it's difficult to access. Particularly because you have really large companies who've come into the waste space, and they don't want to work with informal sector. So the informal sector, which is quite poor, actually gets poorer and poorer. So that's one big challenge. I think another big challenge is we don't have enough investment into into these kinds of projects because they're not tangible. You have to have some kind of investment just to build human capital, and then you can do other things. I think a third really big challenge is space. There's no space to do composting at the neighborhood level or even at the larger level. There's no space. And we have to look at the politics of space use, because we do have space for many other kinds of things which don't necessarily lead to green jobs and green livelihoods and can be used by the poor. So I think the politics of how you use a city's spaces is a challenge, because the spaces are not always allowed for activities which are not beautiful, which don't add cultural capital in a very conventional way. And finally, I think our biggest problem is that our cities are hubs of consumption for the rich, and they shouldn't be. We should all learn as middle-class privileged people to consume less and consume more sustainably, but in fact we're consuming more and more, which is adding a lot of burden to the city. And I would like to add a last one, because in fact one of the speakers in an earlier session talked about the challenge of EPR, extended producer responsibility, in Europe. And he said it's a challenge because how do you get companies to be accountable for the waste that their products produce? And I think it's a double challenge in India, because not only do we want, because we are the big market today, all the companies are immediately trying to sell in India, open shop in India. So how do we, our challenge in India is how do we actually get these companies to be accountable, because our legislation is very weak and we're not very strict. But how do we also get them to be accountable in a way which doesn't harm these poor informal recyclers, many of whom are now getting formalized. So we want a social and an environmental responsibility out of EPR. How do we do that? That's a challenge. You know, I love cities. I love the idea that somebody who's born today can expect to be able to live in a place where their identity of caste is not so important, where they'll meet a whole bunch of other people and, you know, really learn and enjoy and profit from the beautiful diversity of our world. Having said that, it bothers me how polluted our cities are becoming. It bothers me how unsustainable we are. We have an understanding of agriculture in rural India, of many rural issues. We don't have a really tangible way forward for cities, and there isn't one silver bullet. So I think I look at cities very optimistically, but I also look at them with a little bit of caution, and I think we have very little time. Climate change is here. We need to be able to immediately accept that there is no option but to consume less in cities. And because cities are small and compact, even a large city like Delhi is still compact compared to acres and acres of rural India, we actually can create circuits of green consumption.